You were born under a system of spiritual law. This system is not vague, not abstract, not metaphorical. It is precise. It responds only to legal instruction issued through the spoken word, backed by spiritual identity. Everything you believe, feel, or desire, no matter how sincere, is irrelevant to this system unless it is spoken in the correct format with the correct tone. That is why Florence Scovel Shinn never taught people to merely affirm what they wanted. She taught them to issue a decree, to speak into the unseen with the tone of one who understands how law works. Because in her world, and in the structure of divine law, your life does not reflect what you hope for. It reflects what you last declared with authority. From the moment you arrived in form, a divine credit line was opened on your behalf. This line is not managed by banks or by earthly institutions. It is governed by spiritual law, held in place by the law of supply and the law of command. It is not given to you conditionally. It exists, but like any line of credit, it requires activation, not through a signature, not through an application, but through lawful speech. Your word is the withdrawal slip. Your tone is the access code. And until you understand that every spoken phrase is a transaction, you will continue to live beneath the provision that has already been assigned to your name. There is no shortage in this system. Florence made that clear in her teaching. All supply is already present, but it is invisible, and it cannot enter the visible until it is lawfully summoned. You do not pull it in with effort. You do not earn it with morality. You do not convince it with emotion. You summon it with alignment. And alignment in this system means speech that matches the laws that govern it. Anything else, hesitation, sarcasm, fear, even modesty, will be interpreted as a command to withhold. Because the law does not filter your statements through intention. It does not ask whether you meant it or not. It does not consider how desperate or faithful you feel. It simply obeys what it hears. What has it been hearing from you? Most people speak as if the divine is still undecided. They speak as if supply is conditional, fragile, circumstantial. They say things like, "I'm trying to trust," or "let's see what happens," or "maybe next time." These are not neutral statements. These are commands, and the law treats them as final. The moment they are spoken, the flow adjusts to match them. This is not a punishment. It is a response. If you say, "I can't afford it," you are not merely describing a moment, you are authorizing the freeze of the line assigned to that situation. If you say, "Money is tight this month," you are not sharing a feeling. You are commanding the channels of provision to constrict. This is not philosophy. It is spiritual economics. Florence said, "Man's word is his wand filled with magic and power." She did not say man's desire is his wand, nor did she say man's hope is his wand. It is the spoken word that activates the force, and not just any word, but the word spoken with legal identity. When you speak from fear, the law hears distortion. When you speak from anxiety, the law receives contradiction. But when you speak from the place of spiritual jurisdiction, when you know who you are, what has been assigned to you, and how this system works, the law has no choice but to execute. It is written to obey. It does not improvise. It does not ask questions. It does not respond to tears, to stress, to silence. It responds to structure. What does that mean for you? It means your lack is not a sign of rejection. It is a mirror of confusion. You have been issuing commands that cancel themselves. You say, "I believe," then joke about being broke. You say, "I'm trusting God," but then speak of debt like it's sovereign. You say, "I receive," but then mention every reason why it might not work. The law cannot navigate contradiction. It simply enforces whichever command was clearest, loudest, and most recent. And if that command was fear-wrapped in faith language, It will respond to the tone, not the surface. So let's clarify what is needed. You have a line of supply. It is active in the invisible. It is not being withheld. It is not paused by judgment. It is not waiting for your emotions to catch up. It is waiting for your decree to match its nature. The moment you speak like one who holds spiritual authority, the moment you declare access in legal form, it moves. Florence wrote, "I now draw from the abundance of the spheres my immediate and endless supply." That sentence is not magic. It is legal syntax. It contains 3 essential elements: identity, immediacy, and scale. I now draw, not I hope, not I wait. From the abundance, not from my job, not from the economy. My immediate and endless supply, ownership, timing, limitlessness. That is what the system recognizes. That is what opens the gate. You have been delaying your own inheritance because you believe that feeling worthy was the key. It's not. The system is not sentimental. It is juridical. You don't need to feel ready. You don't need to prove faith. You need to speak as one who knows the rules. The rules say speak it, and it must become. Not maybe, not eventually, not if the vibration is high enough. Law is not energy. Law is structure, and structure will always win over emotion. So here's the truth. Your provision is not waiting for a miracle. It is waiting for your mouth. The channels are not blocked by lack. They are blocked by misalignment. Every time you soften your language to sound reasonable, every time you use humor to hide disbelief, every time you delay speech because you're unsure, you suspend the system, not because it is harsh, because it is flawless. You are not asking heaven to decide. You are deciding on heaven's behalf. Your word is the document. Your tone is the seal. Your decree is the code. And the account will not move until the system hears what it has been trained to respond to. Spiritual law, spoken with dominion. This is not motivation. This is jurisdiction. This is not manifesting. This is enforcement. And the moment you stop treating your words like decoration and start using them like instruments of command, the moment your invisible credit line will begin to fund everything your silence has delayed. Florence never told you to wait. She told you to speak. The system that governs your provision does not ask whether you feel worthy. It does not monitor your confidence level. It is not calibrated to your past mistakes, your mood, or your memories. It is tuned only to structure, to tone, to speech that carries the imprint of legal command. And until you understand this, you will continue trying to impress something that was never designed to be impressed. You will keep delaying your release, not because of lack of effort, but because you keep failing to sign the form. Florence Scovel Shinn called it the spoken word. Not poetry, not prayer, not emotional pleading, but the form of speech that carries the weight of spiritual law. She said, "Man's word is his wand filled with magic and power. Not man's pain, not his sincerity, not his tears. His word, backed by the knowing of his authority, spoken without wavering, repeated as law." That is what moves the system. That is what releases the supply. And until you speak that way, nothing changes, no matter how deeply you want it to. The mistake most people make is this. They confuse spiritual feeling with spiritual permission. They believe that if they feel worthy enough, ready enough, spiritual enough, then the system will know. But the system doesn't read vibes. It reads structure. It reads whether the command was issued in proper form, from proper identity, with proper clarity. That is why Florence did not say, "Wait until you feel aligned." She said, "Speak the word." Because she understood. Law doesn't respond to preparation, it responds to paperwork. And in this court, the paperwork is always your decree. You don't get access by emotion, you get access by authority. And authority is not a personality trait, it's a voice pattern, it's a tone, It's a frequency that tells the law, I am the one authorized to speak this release. When you speak from that place, the law does not check your credit history. It doesn't verify your past. It doesn't audit your intention. It simply confirms the decree and executes it. But if your decree is missing, or worse, if it's buried under contradiction, the law can only wait. Not because it's cruel, but because it is perfect. The law cannot move on incomplete instruction, and silence, no matter how hopeful, no matter how prayerful, is still incomplete. Florence knew this. She wrote, "Faith is not complete until it is spoken." She did not mean whispered or implied or internalized. She meant said with clarity as law, without hesitation. You keep saying you're preparing, but the law doesn't require preparation. It requires proof. And the only proof it accepts is a lawful statement of identity and access. Not, I hope I'm ready. Not, maybe this is my season. The law responds to sentences like, I now receive my supply. All things flow to me freely. There is no delay in divine substance. These are not affirmations, they are authorizations. The moment they are spoken with full weight, the system begins. You may say, but I don't feel ready to speak like that. Then the delay is not coming from God or the universe or karma or opposition. It is coming from the fact that you've made emotional readiness the condition instead of lawful speech. That's the only adjustment needed. You don't need to grow first, you need to sign. Do you think banks wait for you to feel ready before they honor your check? Of course not. They verify the signature. If the signature matches the authority on file, the funds move. The same is true here. The only difference is that in the divine system, your signature is not ink, it's tone, it's voice. It's the pattern of speech that matches who the law says you are. Heir, not victim. Authorized, not pending. Complete, not in progress. Every time you say, I'm not sure if I'm ready, you delay what was already approved. Every time you say, let me figure things out first, you suspend a transaction that needed only one thing, your word. And every time you say, what if I mess it up, you replace certainty with ambiguity, and the law cannot interpret ambiguity. It only executes certainty. Florence never told you to wait for confirmation. She told you to speak from command. Never ask for just enough, she said. Always claim plenty, under grace, in perfect ways. That sentence contains no hesitation. It is pure signature, pure release, pure order. And that's why it works. The system is not complicated. You don't need years of learning. You don't need to clean yourself up. You don't need to understand every nuance of how manifestation works. You simply need to say the right thing, from the right place, and mean it as final. That's the difference between those who wait and those who receive. Those who receive speak like it's done, not because they're special, but because they understand the rules. And once you understand the rules, everything that felt blocked becomes obvious. You weren't under spiritual attack. You were under spiritual silence. You weren't denied. You were unspecific. You weren't unworthy. You were simply unsigned. The contract was waiting. The account was loaded. The supply was on hold until someone opened their mouth with the right tone. That someone is you. So stop evaluating yourself. Stop delaying until your confidence feels complete. Confidence is not a prerequisite. Obedience is. Say what the system recognizes. Use the language the law has written. Speak like Florence taught you. Divine substance is the one and only reality. God is my immediate and endless supply. Every door now opens by spiritual law. And say it as if the system is listening, because it is. Say it as if the transaction depends on your voice, because it does. Say it not because you feel holy, but because you understand hierarchy. In this structure, law does not reward emotion, it responds to command. You are not waiting on divine timing. Divine timing is waiting on you to issue the order. So issue it. You've been waiting for confirmation, some visible sign, some reassuring evidence that it's working, that heaven heard you, that provision is on the way. But that waiting is not spiritual. It's mental. It's learned helplessness wrapped in the costume of patience. Because in divine law, there is no permission granted based on how well you interpret the signs. Permission is granted when tone matches command, and command begins with your mouth, not your circumstance. Florence never once said that external proof is a prerequisite for internal release. She said faith is expectancy. Expectancy is not a feeling, it's a posture, and that posture is demonstrated in sound, not in mood, not in mental visualization, not in emotional surrender. Sound, tone, word, decree. That's the structure this law obeys, and it doesn't obey suggestion, it obeys voice. This is where most people go blind. They believe the law is waiting for proof, that if they can show they're spiritually mature, emotionally healed, vibrationally aligned, then the system will say yes. But law does not recognize worthiness as a condition. It recognizes clarity. It listens for the note. It filters your atmosphere and scans for a frequency that matches the vibration of finality. Not longing, not hope, finality. The tragedy is this. You think your faith failed because you didn't see results, but the law was waiting for a tone you never issued. You whispered when you were supposed to command. You phrased it like a suggestion instead of a decree. You inserted disclaimers. You gave it conditions. And every one of those errors diluted the tone until your order became unrecognizable to the system written to obey you. This is not philosophy. It's legal mechanics. You live inside a spoken universe governed by invisible codes that do not bend to your sincerity, only to your sound. Florence understood this. That's why she said whatever man feels deeply or images clearly is impressed upon the subconscious mind and carried out in minutest detail. The subconscious does not evaluate you. It records you. The law does not negotiate with emotion. It enforces the last clear instruction. You want proof before you speak with conviction, but you'll never get it that way. Proof comes after instruction, not before. You don't see withdrawal slips validated before they're handed to the bank. You don't wait for money to appear before you write the check. You write the check because you trust the account exists. That's the divine template. The law doesn't need proof to begin moving. It needs your confidence in the system it governs, and that confidence must be audible. Think of it this way. Every time you speak, you are either issuing a request or declaring an order. If your voice is uncertain, the law files it as incomplete. If your tone is hesitant, the transaction is delayed. But if your voice carries the texture of spiritual jurisdiction, everything responds, not because of who you are, but because of how the system is built. Heaven is not sentimental. It is systemic. You cannot cry your way into fulfillment. You can only command what is already yours. You keep saying, I need to believe more. But belief is not the gap. Tone is. You keep saying, I'm trying to get aligned. But alignment is not a mood. It's a legal signal, a voice print that tells the system you are no longer double-minded, that you are no longer issuing conflicting instructions, that you've settled the case and now issue the verdict. Florence's genius was this. She never taught from emotional appeal. She taught from jurisdiction. She said, the game of life is a game of boomerangs. Man's thoughts, deeds, and words return to him sooner or later with astounding accuracy. That statement is not metaphor. It's instruction. Your words return, not your intent, not your tears, not your effort, your words. And if the words returning to you are small, scattered, or strained, it is not because the law failed. It is because the last command lacked spiritual weight. Tone is spiritual weight. Not volume, not shouting, not desperation, but settled authority. The stillness in your voice when you say, "This is done." The absence of apology when you say, "My supply flows now." The legal gravity behind a statement like, "I do not chase, I command." That is tone. And it is tone, not proof, that turns the invisible into the visible. Most people are speaking in reverse. They say, "I will speak boldly once I see movement." But the system is built in the opposite direction. Movement begins after tone. The account does not respond to need, it responds to tone recognition. The way your phone unlocks at the sound of your voice, so does the field of provision respond to lawful speech. Not speech soaked in doubt, not speech clouded by trauma, just clear, authorized, grounded decree. The more you delay tone, the more you delay reality. The law does not care that you've been disappointed before. It does not remember your losses. It does not factor in your fatigue. It listens for the voice of one who knows the structure. And if you speak with that tone, not the tone of exhaustion or guilt or bargaining, but the tone of someone who understands that their word is law in this system, the entire structure must reconfigure itself to obey. You don't need to repeat the decree because it's magic. You repeat it because it's legal reinforcement. You are driving the tone deeper into the mechanism of law. You are sealing the transaction. You are setting the atmosphere to match the syntax of heaven. And once that is done, it is irreversible, unless you revoke it with your next sentence. So many revoke without knowing. They speak powerfully once and then casually undercut it hours later. They say, "I draw from divine supply," and then tell their friend, "Money's tight this week." That contradiction nullifies the code. The system cannot execute two conflicting orders. It defaults to the weaker tone, and often the weaker tone is the one you speak most often. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. That is why Florence emphasized spiritual discipline. You do not speak what you feel. You speak what the law must obey. You train your mouth to match the invisible order. You stop waiting for proof and start producing the sound that generates it. You lead with decree. You follow with evidence, not the other way around. Let me say it as clearly as I can. You are not denied. You are not behind. You are not being punished. You are being waited on by a system more faithful than anything you've ever known. And that system is listening, scanning, obeying. All it needs is your tone, lawful, final, non-negotiable. So speak like you're already backed. Speak like there's nothing left to ask for. Speak like every unseen gate has already been opened, because in divine law, they have. And the only thing missing now is your voice, saying what Florence said, not as poetry, but as spiritual protocol. I now draw from the abundance of the spheres my immediate and endless supply. Say it again, not because you're uncertain, but because it's law. Every word you speak is processed not just for content, but for authorship. The divine system that governs provision does not simply ask, "What did they say?" It asks, "Who said it?" And that question, the inquiry into identity, is what determines whether your command carries legal authority or whether it is dismissed as invalid. You've heard it said, the law responds to voice. But it's not just voice in the acoustic sense. It's voice as a signal of identity. The same sentence spoken by two different people does not produce the same result. Why? Because one spoke from knowing and one from performance. One knew their right to speak and one hoped to be heard. The law does not move on hope. It moves on identity-backed decree. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that man is always demonstrating who he believes he is, not through behavior, but through word. She wrote, "Man can only receive what he sees himself receiving." That seeing isn't visual, it's internal identity alignment. You don't receive more than you believe you are, And you don't believe you are more until your words start matching the profile of a spiritual heir. That's what you are. An heir, not a supplicant, not a trial case, not an exception in need of special handling. You were issued legal authority under divine law the moment your soul incarnated. And that authority is not expressed through begging or explaining. It is activated through lawful tone that matches your rightful identity. Every deviation from that tone, every false humility, every disguised fear, every compromised phrase is interpreted as a security mismatch. Not because the system is punishing you, but because it is protecting the sanctity of the flow. The flow only obeys its rightful owner. So I'll ask you plainly, when you speak, who are you speaking as? As a child of lack or a steward of abundance? As a wounded one seeking pity, or as a legal agent of divine provision? As someone who wishes, or as someone who knows? This system is precise. It doesn't respond to sentimental declarations. It responds to legal consistency. You cannot speak like a king one day and a victim the next and expect uninterrupted supply. You cannot make decrees on Sunday and cancel them on Monday and expect doors to stay open. Identity must be held, not visited. It must be demonstrated in speech, not implied in desire. Florence said, "Man must be careful of his words, for words run ahead of him and prepare the way." She didn't say intentions run ahead. She said words. And not just the words themselves, but the signature embedded in them, the spiritual seal. The sound that tells the system, this voice belongs to the one authorized to access this line. You've been issued access, but access must be verified. Think of how authentication works in the world of finance. You don't just enter a password. You pass identity checks. You confirm you are the owner. The system looks for pattern, history, tone, and in the spirit, the same is true. You may speak the sentence, but if your tone carries hesitation, confusion, unworthiness, the system marks it as unauthenticated. Not because it's cruel, but because it's exact. The system cannot grant access to anyone pretending to be someone they're not. Even if that pretense is unconscious, even if it's well-meaning, if your speech carries the imprint of, "I'm not ready, I'm not sure, I hope this works," the law treats it as mismatch. No funds are released, no doors open. Not because you're rejected, but because you haven't presented the correct identity. This is not punishment, it's precision. If heaven moved on every emotional plea, the system would be chaotic. Instead, it waits for voice verification, the sound of dominion, not drama. And the voice of dominion does not yell. It doesn't perform. It simply speaks from knowing, and that knowing is reinforced every time you open your mouth and declare without flinching, "I am the one authorized to speak this into being." What does that sound like? It sounds like clarity without explanation. It sounds like instruction without apology. It sounds like truth spoken as law, not suggestion. It sounds like someone who does not rehearse belief, but inhabits it. You must become that voice, not eventually, now. You must stop speaking as if the law needs to be convinced. It doesn't. It just needs to recognize you. And it can only do that if your speech has been trained to match your role. No more borrowing phrases you don't embody. No more repeating affirmations like formulas. The law is not enchanted by incantation. It's activated by alignment. Alignment means your outer voice matches your inner position. You are not speaking to become powerful. You are speaking because you are already seated in power. That shift from seeking to sealing is what separates spiritual performers from lawful commanders. One performs to get results. The other speaks because the result is already legally secured. Florence called this the law of substitution. You replace the identity of lack with the identity of wholeness. Not by doing more, but by saying more precisely. She said, The subconscious mind has no sense of humor, and people often joke themselves into unhappy experiences. That's not about being careful. It's about being exact. Your words must represent your identity, or they will represent someone else's, and you'll get results that don't belong to you. This is not a crisis of worthiness. It's a crisis of role confusion. You are still speaking like someone waiting for approval, but the system has already given it. You are still phrasing sentences as if someone else holds the key, but the account is in your name. You are still speaking as if you need to earn the right to be heard. But the only thing you need to do now is sound like someone who's finally ready to be obeyed. Because the law is not deaf. It's listening for the voice that matches the access file. And if that voice carries even one note of self-disqualification, the flow pauses, not out of anger, but out of order. So make this the turning point. Speak only what matches your rank. Refuse to give voice to anything beneath your title. Silence the language of delay, of confusion, of weakness. Speak as the one you were always meant to be. Heir, commander, steward, signature bearer of the invisible wealth waiting to take form. The system is not asking you to change yourself. It's asking you to change your voice. Because until your voice reflects your rightful identity, nothing will move. And the moment it does, nothing can stay withheld. There is no such thing as spiritual cost. That idea is foreign to the system you were born into. You do not earn access. You do not accumulate merit. You do not pay your way into divine compensation. In this system, payment has already been made. Provision has already been assigned. Every door you are meant to walk through, every resource you are meant to steward, every opportunity with your name on it has already been prepaid in full. But even though it's prepaid, it still must be claimed. And the claiming does not happen through action, nor does it happen through labor. It happens through speech, speech that matches the structure of the system, the hierarchy of divine law, and the tone of spiritual ownership. Florence Scovel Shinn said, "Man must prepare for the thing he has asked for when there isn't the slightest sign of it in sight." But she did not mean prepare emotionally. She meant legally. She meant spiritually. And the preparation is not about organizing your life. It's about organizing your authority. It means speaking from a place of finished provision, not future uncertainty. Think about the principle of a prepaid card. The value is already loaded, but unless you swipe, nothing is released. You can hold the card for years, carry it with you daily, even pray over it, but until you insert it into a system and confirm your claim, nothing moves. The card does not withhold funds. You just haven't used it. The same applies to the spiritual account assigned to your name. You can fast, meditate, visualize, and discipline yourself with every method you've been taught. But until you claim the provision through legal speech, nothing is released. Because the system does not move on preparation. It moves on spoken permission. Florence made this clear when she wrote, "The invisible forces are ever working for man who is always pulling the strings himself, though he does not know it." What she meant was simple. You are the one who signals when the release begins. Not God, not fate, not time, you. And if your signal is silence, the system waits. If your signal is contradiction, the system pauses. If your signal is unworthiness, the system withholds, not out of punishment, but because the code you issued did not match the access it was written to honor. So here's the question that changes everything. Have you claimed what was prepaid? You may think you have. You may say, "I've affirmed it," or "I've prayed about it," or "I've journaled gratitude." But none of that constitutes a legal claim unless it was issued aloud, in the right tone, from the right identity. The law responds to sound, not subtlety. It responds to directness, not hoping. And above all, It responds to structure. This is why Florence did not give you vague affirmations. She gave you decrees. I now draw from the abundance of the spheres my immediate and endless supply. That is a release statement. That is a claiming sentence. It contains the action, I now draw, the source, the abundance of the spheres, the result, my immediate and endless supply. That is how you speak when you understand how the system works. But most people never speak that way. They speak as if they still need to pay. They speak as if they owe heaven something. They speak from a place of subtle guilt, as if they've been given too much already and must now prove their worth to receive more. But guilt does not unlock provision. Neither does effort. The only thing that activates the prepaid flow is a voice that understands the transaction is already complete and speaks accordingly. You are not placing an order. You are redeeming a receipt. You are not hoping to qualify. You are confirming your inheritance. You are not asking. You are taking possession of what was assigned before your birth. The delay you are experiencing is not because the supply isn't there. It's because the speech isn't aligned. Until you say what the system is coded to respond to, it will continue to hold what is yours. Not because it wants to, but because it cannot legally release funds to someone who hasn't claimed them in the correct format. Every time you say, I hope it comes, you delay. Every time you say, maybe I'll get lucky, you disqualify yourself. Every time you say, we'll see, you turn spiritual provision into a coin toss. The law cannot move on that language. It needs certainty. It needs signature. It needs sound that matches the legal structure of divine issuance. Florence called it divine order. She said, when man can say, I now let go of worn-out conditions and establish the divine order in my mind, body, and affairs, the new will come to pass. The new does not come because you want it. The new comes because you've spoken a release of the old and a claiming of the new. That's the pattern. Let go. Declare. Claim. Let go of the lie that you need to deserve it. Declare that it's already been issued. Claim it as if it's already been received. That is the rhythm of provision. That is the voice of authority. And that is the only way heaven is legally authorized to distribute what's already been stored under your name. You've spent enough time believing in the supply. Now, it's time to speak to it. Speak to your rent as if it's already handled. Speak to your wallet as if it holds no limitation. Speak to your day as if it's already governed by overflow. This is not delusion, it's enforcement. The spiritual world is not impressed by your logic. It's activated by your alignment. And alignment is not internal, it's spoken. When you say it is mine, and your tone matches the weight of that sentence, the system begins to move without delay. You cannot keep waiting for signs. You are the sign. You are the final word. And until you speak in the tone of one who knows that everything they touch has already been paid for, the system will treat you as a bystander, not a participant. But the moment you shift, the moment you stop speaking like someone asking for clearance and start speaking like someone authorized to enter, every gate recognizes you. Florence never taught you to hustle. She taught you to align. She taught you to speak what was already true in the spirit, not to make it happen, but to let it manifest. And manifestation begins with claiming, not wishing, not waiting, just claiming. In the system of divine law, there is no such thing as delay, only miscommunication. The law never forgets. The system never loses your order. The supply never expires. But the fulfillment is suspended until the correct instruction is issued. And that instruction must be written in one thing alone: your word. Your word is the withdrawal slip. Your word is the signature on the transaction. Your word is the final step. You've been standing at the counter of spiritual provision, holding every approval, every confirmation, every divine promise. But you haven't signed. You haven't spoken in a way that the system can recognize. You've brought your intention, your sincerity, your waiting, but you left the one thing heaven cannot override: the voice of command. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote, "Man can only receive what he sees himself receiving." But the seeing she referred to was not imagination. It was structure. Seeing yourself receiving means speaking as one who knows what is due, what is already theirs, what the law has no legal grounds to deny. Until you speak from that place, nothing can be released. Not because God is testing you, but because your instruction is incomplete. The law needs clarity, not volume, not performance, just the simple, exact, lawful sentence that opens the gate and releases what was already finished. This is why Florence gave you such specific language. I now draw from the abundance of the spheres my immediate and endless supply. That sentence is not decorative, it is functional. Every word is doing something in the system. I now draw, present tense activation. From the abundance, source is divine, not limited. Of the spheres, from the invisible, infinite realm. My immediate, the timing is now, and endless, the nature is unlimited. Supply, the thing being released is material, specific, and enforceable. That sentence is not optional, it's procedural. She didn't say, if you feel ready, say this. She said, say it as law. And when you say it as law, not as a chant, not as a hope, not as a poetic phrase, but as a legal directive backed by your identity, the transaction goes through. Every time. Without exception. Because the system was never designed to judge you. It was designed to execute what you command. So what have you been commanding? You say things like, I'm trusting the process, but your tone still signals hesitation. You say, money is coming, but your atmosphere says, I'm still waiting. You say, God is my source, but your actions negotiate like you're at the mercy of man. The law is not fooled by your declarations. It waits until your word and your tone and your posture match. That is the signature it's been trained to respond to. And until it hears that signature, it holds the funds, not to punish you, but to protect order. The system cannot allow funds to move to someone who hasn't identified themselves lawfully. Your speech is your identification. Your tone is your verification. Your consistency is your authorization. This is why Florence emphasized repetition, not as superstition, but as reinforcement. The system is not moved by how many times you speak, but by how often you cancel what you've said. Repetition is not to convince the law. It's to prevent you from contradicting the order before it's complete. You are not convincing the universe. You are confirming your jurisdiction. You are anchoring the vibration long enough for the delivery to take form. Every time you open your mouth, you are either sealing the transaction or reopening the negotiation. And the more you negotiate, the more the law delays fulfillment, not because it's unsure, but because you are. So end the negotiation, say the word, sign the slip, and spend what has already been assigned to you. Spending is not always material. Sometimes it means walking with confidence. Sometimes it means behaving like the provision already arrived. Sometimes it means declining fear. Sometimes it means sowing, declaring, showing up, shifting posture, speaking up, or stepping away from environments that no longer match your decree. Florence called it walking by faith. But in her world, faith was not mystical. It was procedural. It meant acting in alignment with what had already been spoken. She wrote, "Faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly." That is the essence of divine transaction. You don't act to receive. You act because it's already yours. So speak. Say the sentence, not timidly, not conditionally, but as if the very nature of law requires it to obey you. Say, I now draw from the abundance of the spheres my immediate and endless supply. All channels are free. All doors are open. No thing is withheld. No timing is delayed. No condition is denied. The supply has heard, and I spend it in full alignment with divine purpose. Don't whisper it. Don't rush it. Say it like someone who knows the law is listening, because it is. And when you're done speaking, walk away like someone who has already spent it. You don't stand at the counter waiting for verification. You don't beg the cashier to honor the slip. You don't keep checking whether it went through. You sign, you spend, you leave. This is the posture of divine withdrawal. This is the rhythm of spiritual authority. This is what Florence trained you to do. And now that you know, the only thing left is this. Do not revoke what you just signed. Hold the tone. Hold the word. Let the law obey what it's always been waiting to hear, and nothing else.